you may be, however you may be listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Don Andrew, joined every week by my main man, Richie Bradshaw. Before we get into the nitty gritty, go to comment, like, subscribe on the video, all of that fun YouTube stuff. Follow us on Twitter at RichieBrads36. Follow me on Twitter at Don Andrew or X or whatever the cool kids call it. Richie, the AC is on absolute full blast here. We are in the dog days of summer, both in terms of the heat and the lack of football content. How are you?
I am good, Donnie. So it's like you said, it's dog days. So it's one of those leave the house as little as you possibly can. Enjoy your AC, especially because you're paying for it. So get your money's worth. And if you got a pool, enjoy your pool. If not, just enjoy that AC.
I'm not a big pool guy, man. I think it
Really?
stems to, I burn just so quickly.
Yeah.
Like it is not a good time. I don't tan. I go from like pale to tomato. There's no in between.
Mm-hmm. I I I like being able to go to a pool. I don't know if I would ever want to own one, especially there's a lot of upkeep that people don't realize that goes with those. But like my parents have one, so it's fun to go over and see mom and dad and play some legendary pool basketball every once in a while.
Man, the battles we've had in that pool will go documented down into history. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your Arizona Cardinals, who had a 4-13 season last year, and we kind of hinted at this on the last show we recorded. More or less defending Kyler Murray against the whole video game narrative. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's on the YouTube channel. But we hinted at possibly talking about what would be like a realistic win total, expectations, kind of like what would a good year be for the Arizona Cardinals. That's exactly what we are here to talk about today. So just kind of bring this back to last season, Richie. 4-13 record. They cleaned house with Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim and Jonathan Gannon and Monty Austin entered the picture. And we saw a lot of people depart the organization, from the front office to the coaching staff to the roster. None of the big names they had in free agency, they brought back. On top of that, they cut DeAndre Hopkins in June. They traded Isaiah Simmons during preseason. They cut the presumed starter Colt McCoy a couple of days before they ended up acquiring Josh Dobbs. There was a lot of names people thought were going to play football for the Arizona Cardinals last year that ultimately didn't. But I think it ended up being good. I think it ended up being a much needed, ugly, but necessary first step in terms of the rebuild and what the Cardinals wanted to do under Monty Austin for it. And then moving into this year, we just have a little graphic of the schedule, courtesy, obviously, of ArizonaCardinals.com. Not the worst schedule, but the more I look at it, man, like you start out the season at Buffalo, then you come home to play against the Rams, the Lions, Commanders, whatever. But then you have the Niners on the road, the Packers on the road, the Chargers back home, and then on the road against Miami. That'll be very tough. And then you have two division games to close out the season. Both should be, no, one's on the road against the Rams, and then the Cardinals are at home in week 18. We'll see what the Niners are like week 18, Richie. We'll see what the Cardinals are like week 18. But it's going to be up to the Cardinals to see exactly how the schedule is going to pan out for them.
This is a schedule that is brutal on paper. Like to go through super duper quick. Bills could be a loss. Rams, Lions, 49ers twice. Rams twice, Seahawks, who knows? Packers, Bears will be interesting. Dolphins, who knows with the Vikings? Like, this could be an absolutely crushing schedule for the Cardinals that ends up having them another top 5 pick next year. But the difference between last year and this year is you have allowed your culture to set in. These guys played their hearts out last year.
Yeah.
We talked before the podcast. You could have started off the season 3-0. And there was, how many games did you say were one-score games?
We'll bring it up in a minute, but 5.
Got it. Yeah, it's a team that you're hoping in year 2 will be able to finish those games. And if you're able to do that, and you're able to play your competition really tight because you beat Dallas last year, and Dallas was one of the best teams in the NFC, you're capable of doing it. This, as daunting a schedule as this is, there's still an opportunity for you to find 7-8 wins. And who knows, maybe if everything clicks, you can compete for a playoff spot.
Right. And I really like how you brought up the whole culture already being established, because that's massive. Like That is very, very massive for what they want to do moving into 2024. Because last year you have the unknown from everything from like what the team's going to look like to the daily schedule, right? Like, who needs to be where at what time. Now that's already established. Everybody in the facility in the building knows, hey, here's where we need to be at this time. We can actually put a little bit more aside time wise to focus on football. We don't have to worry about the little minuscule things. And Gannon did say that they did make some tweaks to the schedule, like every NFL team does every offseason. But a big chunk of kind of letting the dust settle and everything getting established here is already in there. The soil and the seed is already planted, right? They don't need to worry about that. They can actually focus on the X's and O's and the Jimmys and Joes of football moving forward rather than kind of getting used to a schedule. Obviously, there's still a bunch of new faces in, 12 new guys from the NFL draft. A handful of impact free agents were added. So, there's still a lot of fresh faces being brought in. I don't know if you saw, but ESPN ranked all of the under 25 talent for each team. The Cardinals were at number 6. Yeah, no, they said guys like Paris Johnson, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Michael Wilson were their quote unquote blue chip prospects. And people forget Kyler Murray's 26. So like he barely missed a cut to be included into that too. So a lot of young talent, a lot of good young talent. But like you said, every week you're playing against a very, very good team in the National Football League. Half of those games are at home, half of those games are on the road. There's a lot of non-favorable stuff here on the schedule, but I mean, we got into that a little bit into our schedule deep dive, which we did a couple months back whenever schedule was released. Go and check that. A little plug for more content if you need it during the dog days of summer,
which we know you do.
Absolutely. Why there's hope, Richie. It feels like the overall outlook on the organization moving into 2024 is, for the most part, positive. There's a lot of optimism that the team can improve on its 4-13 record. It's just a matter of how much, right? I think the number one thing working for them is a healthy Kyler Murray. They did not have that last year into training camp, into the offseason. For the first half of the regular season, they didn't know. And then you threw Kyler Murray in there, no preseason, no live reps with his guys against actual competition. And he led you to 3 out of 4 wins. And now you have a full offseason with him. You added Marvin Harrison Jr., you added an improved offensive line. You got Zay Jones. You drafted the second running back taken off the board in the 2024 NFL draft. Yep. There's a lot of things working towards your way, and that kind of ties into the third point. And then you highlighted the second point already. 5 losses in 2023 were within 1 score. So, like, these guys were not getting blown out for as bad as their record looked, Richie. They were not getting blown out. They were competitive. And that it's not a pity like, oh, they tried hard. They just didn't win. No, they were
get a participation medal kind of thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. They were competing. They were pushing teams to their limit. And I know at the end of the day, wins and losses ultimately judge what teams are and who you are in the National Football League. But it felt like every week, everybody knew the Cardinals were going to lose. But every week, they clawed and scratched their way to whatever losses that they ended up having. And everybody around the league was like, man, how about those Cardinals? Like, they are playing under Jonathan Gannon. Now you get more talent around him, and that's what it is, right? Like the fight, the effort is already there. You just needed the talent. And I think at least offensively, we can talk about the defense here in a moment, at least on that side of the ball with the healthy Kyler Murray, that's exactly what they did.
Yes, and they're playing to the strengths of Kyler Murray, where you're adding big body receivers. Michael Wilson, 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in that ballpark. Marvin Harrison Jr., 6'3", 6'4". I can't remember what he measured in at the combine. Trey McBride is 6'3", I believe. He might be a little bigger than that. James Conner, 6'1". Trey Benson is 6 foot, I believe. There's big body guys for him to be able to play with as receiving options. And that's when Kyler Murray is at his best, when he has those guys who can play above the rim, and having those guys where he can put up the ball, and first of all, he can sling it. So, I mean, he can put the ball up 50 yards down the field, and a guy can go up and bring it down for a big play. But you've also got a really good supporting cast in the backfield. You've got Trey Benson, who's the future of the backfield. You've got James Conner, who's coming off his first career 1,000-yard season. There are guys to be able to take pressure off of Murray a little bit and allow the offense to be a threat at all 3 levels of the field. this is where the Cardinals are going to be able to be competitive, is by having an offense that allows you to be what's the word? They potent
Sure.
wherever they might be.
Dynamic. Yeah.
Dynamic, thank you. Yeah. This is a fun offense on paper. So if everything clicks, this should be no worse than top half of the league by the end of the year.
I completely agree. And it's funny because a bunch of players have done just like TV radio hits with like NFL Network, for example. Everybody from like Kyler to Trade to Paris Johnson Jr. has gone in front of a camera and they've said, we expect to have the top offense in the National Football League. And they wholeheartedly believe it. And I think when you look at how well the Arizona Cardinals ran the football last year, with a dynamic guy like Murray under center, with more weapons added around him, Zay Jones, Marvin Harrison Jr. is fresh faces being added to a core that already had, like you said, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch in the slot, Trey McBride, James Conner touting the rock. Like that's room for scary hours too. And like we need to also look at Drew Petzing as well, the second year offensive coordinator. I thought he did a very fine job for the utensils he was given with last year to cook. Now he's in a whole new different kitchen. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can do in terms of what the Arizona Cardinals can accomplish offensively. The ball certainly in his court, Richie, but flipping that over to some of the bigger questions that we have. And I feel like when you talk about the pros and the cons of the Cardinals, you basically just split it up between the offense and the defense because the offense has so much potential. There's a lot that you can get done on that side of the ball. Defensively, though, it still feels like there's a lot of work, primarily in the secondary. That highlights our first point, a very young cornerback room. Last year, they relied on guys like Starling Thomas, Keitrell Clark, and Garrett Williams, all three rookies who played heavy snaps for the organization. This year, they brought in Sean Murphy Bunting as their like key veteran guy, which I like Murphy Bunting. I think he's a really good cornerback too. But he's what, 27, right? And he's going to be the leader of this room. That's not a shot at him, not a shot at the Cardinals, but like Sean Murphy Bunting is not your like run of the mill average corner vet, right? Like
No,
they're normally
and
a little bit older.
he's right. He's had his best success in a like a secondary third role. Like in Tampa Bay, he was a stud, but the difference was he was next to Jamel Dean and he was next to Carlton Davis, which placed him in a great situation. And like you said, this isn't a shot at Murphy Bunting. It's just we haven't really seen him as a number one corner in the spotlight to see how he plays. But who knows? Maybe Garrett Williams takes a step forward that we're kind of hoping and praying he is able to take because he is talented enough to be a number one corner at the next level, in my opinion, at least. So it'll really be interesting to see how Murphy Bunting is able to handle such a heavy workload this year.
So you have that. You have Max Melton, the second round pick, who's going to come in and probably be the starter opposite of Murphy Bunting on the boundary with Garrett Williams at the slot corner. And then you have Jaden Davis, the Miami draft pick, the day 3 guy that they took to. A lot of first year guys, a lot of second year guys, which is not a bad thing, but there's not a whole lot of overall experience in this room. And that just leaves a giant question mark for better or for worse. And then speaking of giant question marks, the pass rush department, they were very okay banking on guys like BJ Ojulari, Zaven Collins, and Dennis Gardeck, all individually taking a step up in their edge rushers room, which also includes Cameron Thomas as well. I like BJ. I think BJ is in for a really good second year. I'm not sold on Zaven. I'm not sold on Dennis Gardeck. I am a Cam Thomas guy, but I'm not expecting big production out of him. My point is that this was one of the weaker points of the team, and they did very little to address it. And for a team who had just 33 sacks, which is bottom 3 in the NFL last year, to not really touch that portion
Right.
of the football team. And granted, they beefed up the defensive line. There's probably hope guys like Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, and Darius Robinson can help get to the quarterback and maybe help those outside guys get better one-on-one looks. At the end of the day, this is still the same group you brought from last year, and I'll believe it when I see it. And I'll just leave it at that.
No, and I think that's the right way to look at it is like set the bar low. What's the saying? Undersell, overachieve. This this pass rush shouldn't be expected to be one of the best in football. You are hoping that they can generate enough to at least keep the rest of the offenses in front of them honest. You're also kind of hoping, Donnie, that the secondary is able to play well enough to help get those coverage sacks.
Yep.
Like, there's multiple ways to generate a pass rush, and one of the ways is to have a secondary that's so sticky and so tight that you can't find receivers that are open, and it turns into quarterback holding onto the ball for a second too long, and then a guy gets home. These are both the secondary and the pass rush. You're looking for one of them to be able to step up so the other is able to play well. Because it could be the opposite. A young corner room may need the pass rush to step up and have quarterbacks throwing errant throws that are going to lead to incompletions and pass breakups, and interceptions. These are the things you're going to be looking for from your very young defense is one of the units to be able to step up and help the other unit. If you don't have one of the two step up, this is going to be a long year for the defense, and it could be the unraveling of the team because this Cardinals offense, they can average 25 points a game. But if the defense is giving up 28 points a game, last I checked, that ends up with losing games.
I dropped out of community college, but I think the math checks out there. So
I went to Arizona State, so I wasn't exactly a math whiz.
Forks up, baby. Shout out to Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Go ahead, subscribe to that channel. Hashtag road to 1K. So hopefully we get there before the start of football season. The last point, the unknown. And we were talking about this before we recorded, Richie. So many teams each and every offseason get pegged as paper champions. They improve a lot on paper, but they just can't put it together. It's hard to find people more optimistic than I am on the Cardinals' overall outlook this year. They're not planning Super Bowl parades. I don't think they'll ultimately make the playoffs when the dust settles, but I think they'll compete. I think they'll be very competitive. I think they'll be a lot better than people think they will be. And a lot of that faith is being planted on the shoulders of a healthy Kyler Murray, taking everybody and just moving everybody forward. But we don't know. We have not seen this collective group have success yet. And until they do, and until they go out on the football field and produce wins and just night and day separate themselves from the football team they were last year, it's all just talk. It's all just hearsay. We actually have to see it. And so far, we haven't.
Talk is cheap.
Talk is cheap, baby. And everybody's bank accounts are full in the offseason. So, Richie, we went through the good. We went through the bad. What are some realistic expectations for the Arizona Cardinals moving to 2024?
You won 4 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
You need to win more. At a bare minimum, you need to win more. Even if it's 5 games, that is positive progression for you. It's not a lot, but it's something. If you match your win total from last year, that's not a good thing at all.
Yeah, I would agree.
You need to be better. If it's 6 wins, if it's 7 wins, if it's 8 wins, you just need to find a way. You could have a losing record, but you cannot have less than 4 and you cannot match 4 wins. You need to show progression forward as becoming a better football team, one that collectively can start finishing games. What do we say at the top of the show? You could have been 3-0 last year to start the season. You should have beat the Commanders. You should have beat the Giants. You did beat the Cowboys. There was an opportunity here for you to really snowball some big wins. And then what's that do for the rest of the season? You probably do have the capability to clean up some of those games against the Seahawks, right? This is a Cardinals team that should be capable of being better than where they were last year. And again, quite frankly, you have to be better than where you were last year. That's a bare minimum for you.
Yep. No, 1,000%. I cannot hammer home how much I agree with you. Last year, I think, was really good and needed for the organization because everybody saw what the offseason looked like. Everybody kind of knew, okay, they're not doing anything this year. We see the team, we see the new coaching staff. Just don't die. Basically, was the overall sentiment. It's just like win maybe 2 games, maybe surprise a couple people here and there, and they did that. You know,
Right.
they surprised the Cowboys, they surprised the Steelers, they surprised the Eagles, they surprised the Falcons whenever Kyler came back for his first game. They fought hard, they played hard. Jonathan Gannon, just an overall great dude on and off the field. Everybody here is rooting for him. Now it's time to win. And, that's not double digit wins. That's not, hey, you need to make the playoffs or you're on the hot seat. But you need to start stacking wins. We saw the players that you added in the offseason. You're in year 2 of your coaching staff. And like we touched on earlier, it's new. We don't really know the system. Nah, you've played in it for a full season now and you've had a full off season with it. You should know the playbook. You should know the system. It's time to tweak it and time to advance. I think there's not pressure, but I'm watching the coaching staff. I'm watching to see how much better Jonathan Gannon got. I want to see how different the Nick Rallis defense is. I want to see what tweaks that Drew Petzing made to his offense, because that's the margin between winning and losing. Because now teams have legitimate 1 full season tape on what the Cardinals want to do offensively and defensively. I don't want to say the teams last year who lost to Arizona were caught by surprise, because they weren't. I think the Cardinals just outplayed them. But the more tape you have on somebody, the better. And now teams have a full offseason to look at your tendencies and go, okay, let's pick this apart little by little, and we can get a really good game plan going for what we want to do moving forward. Now, back to the playing side of it.
Can I play devil's advocate real quick?
Please.
You have a whole years of tape of studying a Jonathan Gannon team, right? Mm-hmm. You do not have a full year's tape of a Jonathan Gannon team with Kyler Murray at the helm.
That is true. You have half of a season. His top weapons, Marquise Brown, gone. Rondale Moore, gone. He had a worse offensive line. The defense was worse than what it is at this point in the offseason right now. I mean, there's still a lot of unknown too. And obviously, I don't think they were, what's the word I want to put? I don't think the training wheels were on whenever Kyler came back, but I do think there's going to be so much more the offense has to offer with a 1,000% healthy Kyler Murray.
Right. He was almost on a pitch count. You had to be able to ease him back into the role. You need him to build that confidence on the knee. You can't instantly expect a guy who was less than a year removed from an ACL tear, which is about the most serious injury that you can have playing professional football. You cannot expect him to come back and instantly be confident on it. There's not only do you have about a half season's worth of Kyler Murray tape under Jonathan Gannon, it's not even Kyler Murray at 100%. Now he's going to be 100% for more than likely. You would anticipate being a year and a half removed from an ACL tear with playing time underneath you would get you back to where you were. And who knows, maybe he has more confidence than he did before to be able to, right. It's all about a mindset thing, but it's also about taking care of your players. And Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort and everybody else that was involved with the offense had to understand, hey, we need to have realistic expectations here for Kyler Murray. We can't expect him to come out and be what he was before. So just for what it's worth, kind of thing.
All things considered, man, Kyler coming back mid-season, no preseason, and like we alluded to earlier, no real time to kind of gel with his guys. No reps in that system either. No reps in that offense. And we did see a handful of times where there were miscommunications that ultimately led to turnovers. And not to say turnovers aren't going to happen, because it's just a part of football, unfortunately. But I think you'll find that the offense will be a lot more in tune with each other moving forward. It definitely helps when you have studs across the board. But kind of bring this conversation back for Circle Richie. I don't know if there's a win total these guys need to hit for everybody in the Valley to go, okay, that was a good year.
Right.
I do agree that 5 wins is the bare minimum. Like this is the starting point of where we want to be. 5 is the absolute bottom of the barrel.
And it's still not great, but I agree.
Right. No, I think you need to show improvement in the winning column. No matter how you do it, no matter how it happens, you need to win more than 4 football games next year. I don't care. That needs to happen.
Right.
5 is kind of the starting point. I feel like 6 wins is kind of like,
I think that's
okay,
your sweet spot.
like this, we'll take it. Like for being very realistic about these guys for a second, we'll take it. I think 7 for me is kind of that sweet spot to where you're almost doubling your win total from last year, and you're winning 7 games. And you're right around that like late season playoff hunt to where you're probably not going to make it, but you're still mathematically possible. So like you're still pushing hard every day. You're still leading the charge every week, and I think they're very capable of that. Considering they went 4-13 last year, Richie, they were 2 Matt Prater missed field goals away from being a 5-win football team. And like we highlighted earlier, 5 of their losses came within 1 possession of each other.
Right.
And this team only got better through the offseason. So
they sure did.
My expectations are not sky high. I think the more I sit and I talk myself through it, 6 wins would be acceptable, but I think 7 would be the okay. You know what? They did what they needed to do.
Yeah.
So
no, I don't think there's much more to add to that. Is you need to show positive positive progression. You need to show that this team is capable of winning tight games. Yep. They should have a mindset to be able to do so. Sometimes, Donnie, it's not about being the most talented team on the football field. It's about being the most determined team on the football field. And the way that Jonathan Gannon has these guys playing, the way that they have their confidence set, maybe this is it. Shoo, 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 shoo.
I will say, Gannon's going to have those boys ready. He will have those boys ready. They might not be the most talented team in the league. They're not going to win a Super Bowl, but like he's going to have 53 dudes ready to run through a wall for him each and every week.
Yeah.
So,
no.
Anything else before we put an official end to the blabbering that is the All Cardinals podcast?
What would you call exceeding expectations? A winning record? I don't know if that's like me and you have done that before. We've said probably the max ceiling is about 9 wins. I don't know how realistic that is. What would you say is exceeding your expectations? I think I'd go 8 and 9 would be.
I would go doubling your win total from last season, which I think people, even if it's a losing record, I think people here should be thrilled with going from 4 to 8 wins, because at that point you have 8 wins to your schedule. Your draft pick isn't going to be too great, but it's also not going to be like the worst thing. You're still picking like mid round, which you'll still get a phenomenal player out of that.
Right.
And you're going to have so much cap space to work with next year. Yep. And besides like Budda Baker and James Conner, there's really not a whole lot of people set to leave or like need extensions or anything like that.
Yep.
So I think 8 wins would be like, okay, like they had a pretty good year. I would really watch out for them in the offseason to see if they can contend in 2025. But also, man, at the same time, like if they ended up in playoff position, like if everything goes the way it should or the way they hope so, dude, if they made like a late playoff push to like be in contention the last couple weeks of the year,
right?
I wouldn't be super shocked, man.
No.
I really wouldn't.
Nope, because it's about building that confidence. To feed a fat horse on the same thing over and over again, it's about building confidence.
That's right. Well, I hope everybody is more confident today than yesterday after listening to the All Cardinals podcast. Follow us on Twitter at RichieBrads36. Subscribe to Locked On Sun Devils, #Road to 1K on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Druin for all the latest and greatest Arizona Cardinals and news, analysis, updates, and more. Do not head to allcardinals.com. That is our old company. We will have new updates on that hopefully soon. They keep dragging their feet on it. It's really annoying. But anyways, I'll spare everybody from that. Come back, subscribe to the video below. We really appreciate it. Every little bit of support helps. And unless anything crazy happens, we will see you guys next week.